All right, so now we're going to use the method of the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula will solve any quadratic equation. Now, the solution is not always a real-world solution. Sometimes we'll get a complex number, but it will solve the equation. So let's notice our formula, and you want to memorize this thing if you still don't have it in your brain. And note that we've got the quadratic here in standard form. So in standard form, a in front of x squared, b is in x, and c is out to the side. So we're going to solve each one of these. We want to make sure that first the equation in standard form, then we can identify a, b, and c and formula. Okay, so let's notice this is not in standard form. We have an 8 on the right side and we want to move it over. So let's go ahead and move that 8 over to the left side. It will become a negative 8. Oops. And now we have 0 on the right. Now let's identify our a, b, and c. In front of our x squared is an unwritten 1, so a is 1. And it wants to capitalize everything in words, so shouldn't be capitalized. But in front of x is a negative 2. Don't forget that negative sign. And then our constant out to the side is a negative 8. Those negative signs are very important. So you really want to watch those as you go through the formula. All right, so on the top, we're going to have negative b. Well, for us, it'll be negative 2, which is a positive 2, plus and minus the square root well, it does not want to respond. Squared, which for us will be negative 2 squared. And I'm just going to use this so I don't have to keep going back to that equation editor. Oh, it fixed it for me anyway. Minus 4 times a, which was 1, times c, which was negative 8. And close that. That's the top of the fraction. And I'm going to put that all over 2a, 2 times 1. 2 times 1 there in the denominator. Oops, it's not. Let me, it's putting everything underneath the radical, and I don't want that. Okay, there we go. All over 2 times 1. Okay, so now we want to work out everything that we have underneath that square root. And it's very important to pay attention to our signs as we do so. All right, so I've got 2 plus and minus the square root. And rather than keeping going back to that equation editor, I'm just going to put the word square root so we know it's still there. Negative 2 squared is 4. When we square our b, it's always going to be positive. But let's be careful right here. Negative 4 times positive 1 times negative 8. Negative times a negative is going to make that a plus 32. And then the bottom of the fraction will be 2. All right, now let's work this out. 2 plus and minus the square root of 36. All of that, oops, close the top fraction, top of the fraction, over 2. And we get 2 plus and minus. We know the square root of 36. We know that, oops, well, love it when word goes crazy here. 2 plus and minus. The square root of 36 we know is 6. And all of that is over 2. So we've got two answers here. We have 2 plus 6 over 2. And we have 2 minus 6 over 2. That's what our plus and minus means. So in this instance, we get 8 over 2, which is 4. And in our second solution, we get negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. Now, if our answers come down to these nice round answers, it means that the original equation would have factored. Let's look at some that don't. B and our C. A is 3. And again, it's capitalizing everything. B is -4. And C is -9. All right, so let's plug that into our formula. First, we want negative B. For us, it's -4. That makes it positive. Plus and minus. And I'll pull this down just a little bit so you can see the formula as we're going through. And then we'll need the square root. Again, I'll just type it instead of bringing that darn thing down in the equation editor. B squared will be -4 squared minus 4AC. 4 times 3 times -9. And then all of that will be over 2 times A, 2 times 3. All right, so let's work it out. I'll have 4 plus and minus the square root. -4 squared will be 16. Let's watch our signs here. We have a -4 times a +3. That's -12. -12 times -9 is 108. A positive 108. And that entire numerator is over 6. Okay, now let's finish off what's in our square root, and then we'll go to our final answer here. 4 plus and minus the square root of 124 all over 6. Now, we can probably break down 124. I can tell that 4 goes into it. 4 goes into it 31 times. So probably 4 times 31 is all we can do there. So let's break it down into 4 times 31. I can take the square root of 4, that's 2. And I'll still have the 31 inside of that square root. Okay. Now, here's where we need to do some canceling. We need to factor out a common number because we have the number 2 that will come out of this 4 and out of this 2, and we need to go ahead and reduce it with the 6 that's in the bottom since 2 goes into 6. So, x is factor out of 2. 2 out of 4 will be 2, and if we take the 2 away from that square root, it'll just be the square root of 31. Now, I will reduce the 2 with the 6. 2 over 6 reduces to 1/3. We don't have to leave a 1 in front of those parentheses, but we do have to leave the 3 in the denominator. So our final answer, and I'll go ahead and put it back into a normal form rather than kind of writing it out horizontally. There's what it should look like when we put our symbol in for square root and actually write it as a fraction rather than kind of doing the hash mark for the fraction there. All right, so it's 2 plus and minus the square root of 31 over 3. Now, if you're putting this in as two separate answers in My Open Math, you're going to put in 2 plus the square root of 31 over 3 and 2 minus the square root of 31 over 3. All right, so let's look at this last one. Let's notice again that it is in standard form. So here, A is 1, and again, it's always capitalizing. B is 4, and C is 9. And let's plug into our quadratic formula. On the top, we'll have negative B, so in this case, -4, plus and minus the square root, and then B squared will be 4 squared minus 4 times A times C, so 1 times 9, all over 2 times A, so 2 times 1. All right, so Let's work this out. And you might already see what's coming here. All right, so 4 squared is going to give us 16. Here we're going to have minus 4 times 1 times 9, only one negative, so it's going to be a negative 36. And that's all going to be over 2. All right, now let's continue working with that and finish off what's in the square root. That's negative 20. All right, now, we already saw in our complex numbers that we know the square root of negative 1 is I, so we can certainly remove an I from that square root. We can also break 20 down into 4 times 5. So what we've got is negative 4 plus and minus. All right, so 4 times 5, we can take the square root of 4, which is 2, and I have the I that I want to take out, but I'll still have the 5 inside of the square root. And all of that is over 2. Now, just like we did with the last one, a 4 and a 2 can have a 2 factored out of it, and we can cancel that 2 with this denominator and have no denominator at all other than 1 when we cancel. All right, so let's factor out a 2. If I take 2 out of negative 4, I'll be left with negative 2. When I take 2 away from this term, I'll just have the square root of 5, or actually I square root of 5. So my I is still there. And now I can cancel this 2 with the 2 in the bottom, and the final answer is negative 2 plus and minus I square root of 5. And of course it has to capitalize that I on us, doesn't it? And there we have it.